When the black boy shouted, "Don't drink that," no one at the event expected what would happen next. It was a sunny day, and one of the most exclusive charity events in the city was taking place in a luxurious garden overlooking the river. This was the kind of place where champagne glasses sparkled under the sun, and conversations were filled with restrained laughter. People in expensive suits and designer dresses moved from one flower-adorned table to another while waiters offered exquisite canapes. But for Malik, a 12-year-old black boy, this scene felt worlds away from his reality. Dressed in old, faded clothes, he was trying to sell something, anything, to earn money for his next meal. Malik knew he wasn't welcome here. The security guards watched him closely, as if he were an intruder on this carefully guarded territory. "I need to sell this water to make sure I can eat later." As he walked along the edge of the event, something caught his attention. On the other side of the garden stood a woman with an imposing presence, commanding everyone's attention. It was Evelyn Monroe, a billionaire known for her philanthropy, but also for her reserved nature and sharp temper. Surrounded by an aura of power and elegance, she wore an exquisite dress, and her jewelry shimmered like stars under the daylight. A glass of white wine sat on the table in front of her as she engaged in casual conversation. Malik observed from a distance, unsure why he was so drawn to the scene. Then, a tall man in an elegant suit approached Evelyn. Something about him seemed off. Malik saw the man lean over the table as if adjusting something, and for just a moment, his hand hovered over Evelyn's glass. The movement was quick, almost imperceptible, but it sent a jolt of alarm through the boy. Something's wrong. Malik frowned, trying to process what he had just witnessed. Evelyn, engrossed in conversation with another guest, hadn't noticed. The man quickly stepped away, blending into the crowd. Malik couldn't tear his eyes away. His heart pounded. He couldn't explain it, but his instincts screamed at him to act. As Evelyn reached for her glass, Malik sprang into action. He dropped his box of water bottles and sprinted toward the table, shouting, "Don't drink that! Please, don't drink it!" His voice cut through the air like a knife. All eyes turned to him. Evelyn froze, the glass just inches from her lips. Her expression was a mix of shock and irritation as she stared at the barefoot boy now standing breathless beside her table. "Who let this boy in here?" One of the guests sneered with open disdain. A security guard was already moving to escort Malik out, but the boy locked eyes with Evelyn, his voice trembling but firm. "Please, ma'am, I saw him. He put something in your glass. I swear it. Don't drink it, please." The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn studied Malik, weighing whether he was lying or delusional. The guard tightened his grip on the boy's arm, but Malik resisted, still staring straight at the billionaire. "I know no one will believe me because I'm just a homeless kid," he said, his voice steady despite his fear. "But I couldn't stay silent. I saw what he did." Evelyn, visibly unsettled, set the glass back on the table. "Let the boy go," she ordered in a tone that brooked no argument. The guard hesitated but obeyed. Evelyn turned to Malik, arms crossed. "All right, boy. You say you saw something. Who was it?" Malik pointed toward where the man had disappeared. "It was him, the tall man in the gray suit. He touched your glass when you weren't looking." Eyes followed his gesture, but the man was already gone. Evelyn narrowed her gaze, suspicion flickering in her eyes. Yet there was something in Malik's resolve that made her hesitate. "Find that man and bring him back here," she commanded one of the guards. "And have this glass analyzed immediately." The atmosphere shifted instantly. The carefree mood of the event dissolved into tension and suspicion. Malik stood his ground, nervous but certain he had done the right thing. He knew he had acted on what he believed, even if no one else trusted him. Meanwhile, Evelyn silently studied the glass, as if it were a puzzle she needed to solve. Though her expression was unreadable, Malik noticed that, for the first time, she was looking at him as someone whose words mattered. Evelyn's gaze bore into Malik with such intensity that he felt even smaller. But he held firm, despite his trembling hands. At that moment, the guard she had sent out returned, shaking his head. "Ma'am, we've searched the perimeter. He's gone." Evelyn's frown deepened as she turned back to the glass still sitting on the table. The image of Malik's determined face echoed in her mind. There was something about this boy, about how he had risked everything to warn her, that felt more real than she wanted to admit. "Call in a toxicology expert. Now," she ordered, her voice leaving no room for argument. "I want this glass tested immediately. And alert security. No one leaves until we get answers." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some guests glared at Malik with contempt. Others watched him with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. To them, he was just a street kid who had crashed their event. But Evelyn's drastic response and Malik's own conviction raised enough questions that no one dared dismiss him outright. Minutes later, a chemist arrived with a portable testing kit. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he examined the glass. The garden was silent, the tension thick. Evelyn remained seated, her expression unreadable, though her eyes flickered between the chemist and Malik. The boy, meanwhile, stood near the table, clutching his old water bottle box like a shield. He didn't look away, even as the weight of judgment pressed down on him. Finally, the chemist looked up, his face a mix of alarm and disbelief. "Mrs. Monroe," he began hesitantly, "there are traces of a toxic substance in the drink. I can't identify it fully without further analysis, but this shouldn't be here." His words hit like an explosion. A collective gasp swept through the garden, and guests began whispering louder. Evelyn remained still for several seconds before slowly rising. Her expression was steel. "Call the police," she ordered her assistant. "I want this investigated immediately." As the guard moved to comply, Evelyn turned back to Malik. Her gaze was different now. There was respect in it and curiosity. "You really saw it happen?" she asked, her voice softer but still authoritative. Malik nodded vigorously. "Yes, ma'am. I saw him put something in your glass. He thought no one was looking, but I was." Evelyn tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Why didn't you stay silent? You could have walked away and avoided all this trouble." Malik hesitated, gripping his box tighter. He knew he had only one chance to say something that would make her listen. "Because if no one else was going to say anything, I had to," he finally answered. "And if it were my mom in your place, I'd want someone to do the same for her." Silence fell over the garden again. Evelyn inhaled deeply, considering his words. In the distance, sirens wailed as police approached. When the police arrived, the event was already in controlled chaos. Guests huddled in small groups, some stealing glances at Malik, others murmuring in disbelief. Evelyn briefed the officers, handed over the glass for forensic testing, and described the man Malik had identified. "We have cameras covering the entire event," one officer assured her. "If this man did what the boy claims, we'll find the footage." Then attention turned to Malik. An officer knelt to his level, his gaze stern but not hostile. "You're sure about what you saw, kid? Can you describe the man in more detail?" Malik nodded and began recounting everything. The gray suit, the slicked back hair, the polished shoes. As he spoke, he felt Evelyn's eyes still on him, as if she were trying to see something deeper in him. The confirmation came swiftly. The man Malik described had tampered with the glass. "He hasn't left the premises yet," an officer announced. "We'll find him." As police moved to apprehend the suspect, Evelyn turned to Malik, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Today, you saved my life," she said, her sincerity making Malik's throat tighten. "And I won't forget that." Malik could only nod, speechless. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly seen. In the days that followed, Malik's life began changing in ways he never imagined. True to her word, Evelyn mobilized her team to investigate his situation. She learned that he and his 6-year-old sister, Amara, who suffered from severe asthma, lived in a cramped shelter room, struggling to survive. Within weeks, Evelyn secured a small but safe home for them and arranged medical care for Amara. But she didn't stop there. One morning, as Malik played with Amara, Evelyn arrived, holding a folder and a bag. "I have something for you," she said, smiling slightly. Inside the bag was a school uniform from one of the city's most prestigious academies. "This is your next step," Evelyn said, handing him the folder. "You've been accepted on a full scholarship. You'll have everything you need to succeed." Malik stared at the uniform, overwhelmed. "I don't know if I'm good enough," he whispered. Evelyn knelt to meet his eyes. "Malik, you've already shown more courage than most adults I know. If you could do that, you can do anything. Just promise me you'll try." He nodded, still processing it all. Amara beamed and hugged him. "You'll do great, Malik. I know you will." Years later, Malik, now a young man full of ambition, stood on stage at a conference on social justice, sharing his story. "My story is proof," he told the audience, "that every one of us can change a life. Sometimes, all it takes is someone who believes in us when the world looks away." In the crowd, Evelyn watched, deeply moved. She had never regretted helping that brave boy, and now, seeing him inspire so many others, she knew she had done the right thing. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need it. Acts of kindness can change lives in ways we never imagine. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. Until next time.